Good afternoon, everyone. I am Pastor Kia Moore, the proud pastor of the Church at the Well, based here in Memphis, Tennessee. We're across 22 states, so we're a hybrid church with lots of e-members, but 75% of our membership is based here in Memphis, Tennessee. And we have the distinct honor of interviewing Dr. Kizzmekia Corbett, the woman whose research led the development of the vaccine that we say at the Church at the Well is saving the world. So I want to introduce her to you, and then we're going to get into some questions that you guys submitted that we hope will help to build more trust around the vaccine and give you correct information from the woman herself. Dr. Corbett, good afternoon. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, thank you for having me.
We're so honored to have you. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself, where you were educated, how long you've been in virology, and all of that good stuff before we get started?
You know, I'm a Southern girl just like you. I can hear it in your voice. I actually grew up in Hillsborough, North Carolina. And I do believe that my good friend Jackie Payne went to undergrad with you and knows you very well.
Yes, I love
but nevertheless, Jackie. I grew up in North Carolina. You said you loved, I love
yes.
Jackie too. I told her, I said, you know, I slid her in because she knew you. That's kidding.
Because I texted her and I was like, do you know her? She took so long to reply. So by the time you replied, she's like, oh, I couldn't get her. So I was like, okay, God, you opened up a door without somebody opening it for me. But thank you, Jackie.
Absolutely. And then I went to undergrad in Baltimore at UMBC. I majored in biology, and then I went back to North Carolina to my roots and got my PhD in microbiology and immunology. And then I came back to the National Institutes of Health, where I work now, in the Vaccine Research Center. And I've been here since about 6.5 years ago, working on coronaviruses. And so that's my story.
And that's important for people to know, because people think that this is the first coronavirus. They don't know about like SARS-CoV-1 and MERS. They think you just popped up on the scene. So can you just give us a teeny bit of history about the coronaviruses and how this is not the first one that you've worked on?
Yes, coronaviruses are a large family of viruses, hundreds of viruses actually. And generally speaking, they actually only infect animals. So like bats and pigs, etc. But there are seven coronaviruses that have been infectious to humans. 4 of them actually circulate seasonally, like the influenza virus or like during flu season, and just cause sniffles. But then there's 2, now 3, that have caused really big widespread outbreaks. And so that's the first SARS that happened over a decade ago. And then MERS, which started around 2013. And now this virus is causing COVID-19. And so that's the first thing that's really important to know. And the way that I think about it is the reason why we were doing the research for so long is because the virus kept telling us that it had potential to cause a pandemic. If something keeps showing up and you aren't prepared for it every time it shows up, eventually you get to the point where, faith is not on your side, so to speak. And I think that that's what's happening now is when MERS and SARS circulated, it was kind of a one-off event, a small little outbreak regionally. But then this one has caused this global pandemic, over 2 million, millions of people that have died all over the globe, et cetera. And so I think that we just were able to be prepared by way of our research.
Well, thank you for doing the groundwork before we even got here. How did it feel to have Dr. Fauci just declare that you were the woman that was saving the world, and to look into that camera and to tell African-American people that it was a sister that was behind it? Like, how did that make you feel? I can't imagine being in my lab and hearing that he had just told my name to the world.
You know what? I've known Dr. Fauci since I was 19 years old. And I mean, he obviously calls me Kizzy. That was clear in that video. And we really are we have a very casual relationship. I mean, it's professional in that I work in his institute and report up to him through a multitude of other directors and deputy directors. But casually, if I see him in the clinic, hi, Dr. Fauci, hi, Kizzy. Like, it's very casual. And so it didn't really strike. I mean, one of the things that was odd to me is that people didn't know that already, because I'd already been fairly visible outside of Dr. Fauci saying that. And I think that you know, for me, it was an honor for him to mention my name, but I know him so casually that I'm sure it wasn't the first time. It was just the first time that the media caught up on it.
Yeah, yeah. It was amazing for me to see. And that's when I guess how we say, started fangirling, like anything Dr. Kizzy, I was finding it and sharing it just because we didn't know. And even this week, there was so much media here locally, and there were people in the comments who were having this, great Black epiphany, like, oh, it's a Black woman. Like, there's still people who don't know your story, which is just mind blowing. And so that's why we're just so geeked to have you here.
Yeah. And you know what? One of the things that I think it highlights to me is that we really have to just try better to have more inclusive environments in all professions. And so that, I could have been an Asian woman or, an Indian woman, etc. But it still would have stuck out because just these marginalized communities don't necessarily have representation in all spaces. And so for me, that's what it points out even more. I think it's beyond me. I'm happy to represent, so to speak, for us, but we have a long way to go.
Mm-hmm. I agree. So we asked online for people to submit questions. I didn't want to hog the time. I wanted to share the space. And so people submitted questions, and we kind of combed through and combined the ones that were related. And so the first question that people are asking is, can you explain in simple terms what an mRNA vaccine is and how it's different from traditional vaccines? And what do you think are the long-term maybe issues, predictions, or concerns that you have with using mRNA versus the traditional vaccine?
Right. So traditional vaccines that most people are used to are, for example, like the flu vaccine that we get every year. So the flu vaccine is an inactivated virus. So it's basically a way to trick your immune system to think that it got infected, but by giving you a virus that is weak. And so that's how the flu vaccine works. And that's how traditionally vaccines have been made. But no matter how you make a vaccine, the idea is still the same: to trick your immune system to think that it has seen the virus before, so that it is poised, so to speak, and ready to go if you are exposed to the real virus. So traditional vaccines do that by taking a weak virus, and then this messenger RNA that we're using does it, but just with a slightly different technology, where instead of giving yourself a whole virus, we're just taking an important piece of the virus, which is a protein from the virus that is on the surface of the virus. So if you expose yourself to that one protein called the spike protein, then your body, when it sees that protein again, is able to react very quickly. And this is actually pretty interesting because it tells us that you don't need to give the whole virus. You just need to show up with the right part of the virus. The messenger RNA actually does it in a cool way by allowing using your cells to express that spike. So instead of making a whole tons of gazillions of tons of protein in a laboratory, we can use your cells to do that, because that's what cells do. Cells read messages all day. Cells make proteins all day. So why not just use your cells to do something that they are tried and true and almost perfect, honestly, to do? And so that's what we're doing. It's like sending your cells a Snapchat message. For about 24 hours, your cells are reading the message and taking that message and making spike protein. And then your body sees that spike protein and makes an immune response to it. And so when you see the virus later, basically nothing happens. You don't get COVID-19 disease.
Wow. I'm glad that you put it in those terms with the Snapchat. I'm sure our millennials and Gen Z.
it's really, I mean, honestly, it's extremely cool. And, the thing is that while we sit here and talk about it as if it is so new, Moderna and other companies that have been working on messenger RNA therapeutics have been doing this for several years. They've had clinical trials that have been started, for example, with Zika or CMV, which is another virus. And they've done this around cancer therapeutics. I would really beg people to really look at any of these messenger RNA companies, whether it be Moderna or otherwise, and look at their portfolio to see just how long they've been doing this and really how broad the scope of these types of therapeutics are.
Okay. I'm glad you mentioned that too, because there's so much misinformation about mRNAs, and people are saying it's going to change your DNA and all kinds of stuff. So
No.
you.
We're not making you superhuman or anything like that. The way that this works is your DNA is inside, when it's inside, your DNA inside of your cell is in a portion of your cell in the middle of your cell called the nucleus. This message doesn't even go close to that. It stays in what's the squishy outside part of your cell. And it's read in that area, and it almost instantly disappears, like I said, like a Snapchat message. So it doesn't stay around in your cells. It's really unique technology, and it's not going to change your DNA at all.
I can't wait to use that. It's like Snapchat. Can you talk to us about the trials? You mentioned that Moderna has been doing this for years. There are a lot of people that in their minds think that this is still being tested on people. So can you explain to people that, you know, when the trials ended, who was in the trials, what demographics, so that people know that this is already done. It's safe.
Yep. So let me just explain the trial process in general. And so vaccines or any drugs, they have a preclinical portion or stage where that can take years and years and years. Obviously for us, it's taken 6 years or more. And then the trials are 3 phases. So the first phase of the trials that we started in last March is a small amount of people, about 45, 50 people. And it just asks, is it safe? And then the second phase of the trial, you take that up a little notch, giving hundreds of people, 500, 600 people, and you ask, is this further safe? And does it elicit a really good immune response? And then phase 3 is where you get your real answer. Does it work or does it not? And these phase 3 trials are large, 30,000, 40,000 people, and they're placebo controlled. So what that means is that half people get a vaccine and the other half of people get salt water. And then as the cases happen in nature, so these people get their vaccine or salt water, they go about living their daily lives. And if they get sick, whether it be a cough, a fever, chills, any symptom that might be related to COVID-19, they go get diagnosed. And you can see that in this particular trial, that the people that got placebo, their cases just continue to accrue over time. And that's how you start to see the efficacy of the vaccine. And so you're basically comparing the vaccine to the placebo. And so one of the really cool things, especially around with the Black community and any other minority community, is that it wasn't that these vaccines were just tested in white men, for example, right? These vaccines were tested in a very diverse population, about 10% that are African American, 20% that identify as Hispanic, with comorbidities such as diabetes and high blood pressure and et cetera. And so this vaccine was tried in a multitude of people, a multitude of people that mirrors in so many respects the population of this country. And I understand what people mean about, is the trial still going? Because yes, these trials are designed to continue to go. The 30,000 people that were enrolled have the option to remain enrolled for the next 2 years. And so we'll continue to look at safety and efficacy over the course of time. But that doesn't mean anything about the efficacy that we see now, right? When you have this large amount, like the curve for the placebo just goes up, is continuing to accrue cases, and then the vaccine is preventing the cases. It's so clear.
When you say placebo and accrue, I want to make sure that people caught you. Those are the people that did not get the vaccine, right? They continue to get COVID. And the people that got your vaccine did not.
Right. There's, maybe 6 or 7 people that got the vaccine that actually got COVID, which is remarkable in the 15,000 that got the vaccine. So you can tell so much in an interim analysis about efficacy. And that's how you get your 94, 95% efficacy rate. And you can tell so much about safety. So one of the things that is of concern, particularly around mRNA, because at least the general public hasn't ever seen it in people before, is it safe? And will I start to get any symptoms of anything odd happening later? And the answer is just blanketly no. It's very safe. And it's been safe since before the coronavirus, but then particularly now. Remembering that we vaccinated the first 45 people last March. So there are people that have had mRNA in their body since last March, almost a year ago, and they're fine. Actually, they are very fine and very happy, at least the ones that I know that got vaccinated.
I didn't know that. So there are people that got it almost a year ago.
Yep. March 16th is when the phase 1 clinical trial started. The first person got vaccinated. Yep.
Wow.
Yep.
That's so awesome. And so when you talk about, can anything weird happen to your body, that helps go to the next question. Is people were asking about side effects. And I know they saw and the media blow up those, I think 4 people that got Bell's palsy, but because I follow you on everything, I saw that you kind of broke it down in your stories. And I think I remember correctly, you were basically saying that would statistically happen with that amount of people anyway. So can you kind of break down how the things that would normally happen to us can still possibly happen to us with the vaccine or without it? There are people who think they're going to get Bell's palsy or have a stroke or that.
Yeah, it's very it's sad to watch. It's sad to watch the media take hold to things in a way without really contextualizing it, because people need context. And so the context around the few cases of Bell's palsy is that it also happened in the placebo group. And it also happened at the rate of which Bell's palsy happens every day in life, right? And so you can't associate a vaccine with an outcome if that outcome would have happened anyway. And that's just what it is. There's no way that this mRNA, that the mRNA does not traffic to your brain or any of your neurons in order to cause any real neurological issues. So it's kind of like, it's sort of like unfortunately someone passed away after getting their vaccine. I think about 2 weeks after they got their vaccine, I was like, oh my God, they died because they got the vaccine. No one has died from getting the vaccine in particular. The vaccine has not been a causative agent for any death as defined by the investigators so far. And so that is just
in, so they can hear you. It's just posting it and they think I'm lying.
No, it just happens. I think I remember back when, I don't know if you remember the Gardasil, the HPV vaccine, when that started to come out. There was a young woman who got a vaccine and like stepped off of a curb after, like, immediately after getting her shot. And I think that people were saying, oh, the vaccine made her like woozy and loopy, and so she stepped in front of traffic. And it's like, we really have to think about causation in these particular cases, right? And so it's unfortunate to watch the media take a hold to what are essentially anecdotes and uninvestigated anecdotes, rather than take a hold to the now, I think, 17 million people that have gotten the vaccine and are doing fine.
And 0 deaths. Like, and that's what I wrote. I'm like, 0 deaths. So you went through the side effects, the trial group, mRNA. There's another question that keeps floating around. I have not seen the origin of it. There are a lot of people who think that they can't take the vaccine or should not take the vaccine if they want to conceive.
I'm 34 years old. And I have a man who loves me. And so
hello.
If I felt like I was going to put my childbearing at any risk at this age, I certainly would not have taken the vaccine. Actually taking my 2nd dose today, because that's just the stage of which I am in my life. And I would not recommend it for anyone at all, right? There is absolutely no way that this vaccine can affect your fertility. Like I said, it obviously does not affect your DNA at all. And the mRNA safely only stays in your cells for about 24 hours, right? And it's right here in your muscle. And so it's just, there's no way that it can affect your fertility. I've seen pregnant women, I know pregnant nurses actually from our own clinic who've gotten the vaccine and have opted to get the vaccine. And, gynecologists and pediatricians can advise you around vaccination in general. while being pregnant. You probably know this, Kia, but when you were pregnant, they probably told you you should get the flu vaccine because
Yes.
a lot of times the immunity that you have passes on to your child via breast milk and otherwise. And so I just want people to understand that we're not putting your fertility at any risk.
Wow, because I nursed Harper, Lord help me, for 21 months, and this triggered me. But to that end, so could a mom who's taken the vaccine twice and, gotten to the point where we think she could be, immune, she could pass that through a breast milk to her child? Is that what you were suggesting?
Antibodies have been shown for other vaccinations to be passed through breast milk to your children, right? So this is why, I'm trying to think, like why they often ask pregnant mothers to get the flu vaccine during flu season and stuff like that.
Yeah, that I didn't know that, but I think that will actually, you flipped it. People were worried about not taking it. Now I think moms are going to be like, okay, give it to me because I'm nursing.
Listen, I completely understand. I'm not a mother, but I can completely understand where the hesitancy in that regard comes from. And so what my suggestion is, all encompassing around anyone's hesitancy, is to just do your research with the right type of people, right? Ask your OBGYN, ask your pediatrician. And I think in my highlights on my Instagram at Kizzmekia, I have a woman who is an expert in passive immunity around passive immunity, which means like from the mother to a child.
Well, I will be sharing that today. Speaking of children, is the vaccine recommended for children, teenagers? What ages?
So Pfizer's vaccine is currently in emergency use down to 16 years of age. Both of the candidates are currently in what's called age de-escalation, where previously the vaccines were tested at 16 and above or 18 and above, and now we're going down in stepwise down to 12. And then once it's proven safe and effective in that age group, it'll go down again and again. So right now, no, children are not authorized to take the vaccine. There's obvious reasons why, right? You want to prove that a vaccine is safe in vulnerable populations, more vulnerable populations, and in the healthy adult population before you go and start to vaccinate children.
That makes perfect sense. So how long is the vaccine effective? Is it for life? Do people have to take it annually like the flu vaccine?
You know what? That's one thing that we just don't know yet. We have the studies that are ongoing. Things are looking great from the people who got vaccinated last March, which was almost a year ago. I mean, they have steady immune response, antibody responses, etc. But we just don't know how long. You can't really put a number on it. I've heard people with sense, say, at least a couple years or more. And I would say I'm betting on longer than that, but we just don't even know. Yeah. And one of the things that is important is that what needs, especially, is that we just need to get a lot of people vaccinated so that we can stop the virus from circulating. Because I think aside from immunity, which your immune system does what it needs to do, the reason why you get a flu shot every year, one of the reasons is because different strains circulate every year. So your immunity from one year does not equal the immunity to the next year. And so we certainly don't want to start to get strains popping up of different coronaviruses for which the previous vaccines are not able to work against.
So you just made me think about something. So so the flu vaccine changes every year. Is that what you just kind of said?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And people are taking new flu vaccines without
every year. And that's the thing, when people are like, oh my God, this is so fast. I've never seen it happen this fast. I'm saying, you see this happen every single year with the flu.
Like, these are the things that people I'm going to make like a fact sheet when we get done. It's going to have the Snapchat quote, the flu vaccine is new every year. These are
the extent of which is different, but yeah.
And so people were asking about like the mutations in the new strand. So this one, is it like the new super infectious strand that just popped up? Is this vaccine effective for that?
So you know what? We just published something this morning. You said you follow me on Twitter, so we just put out the press release around that. So we're still eliciting neutralizing antibodies. So these are antibodies that basically attack a virus.
Mm-hmm.
So we are still eliciting those types of antibodies against the new strains,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so we think we're good for now,
Mm-hmm.
but you guys have to understand that it is going to take an all around effort from every single individual person to, number one, get vaccinated, and then number two, to not create an environment where these viruses can continue to spread and mutate in our population. If no one got infected, we would have no mutants.
Right.
That's just how it is, right? So these viruses are doing exactly what they came to do. And they're learning our immune systems, and they're learning how to be better at transmissibility and all of these things. And we're really just like handing it to them on a silver platter at this point.
Wow. I mean, and you're right. And even people are worried about the new strain, but we still have this other one that has killed millions of people. So it's like, you need to protect yourself from that one while we work on making sure that you have the antibodies to protect yourself from the next one. It's the logic that people are missing that disturbs me, because as soon as I'm able, here's my arm. Like, I want.
Listen, they were like, I got to the clinic, and like the nurses and stuff, they were like cheering and like, oh my God, Dr. Corbett, I'm so happy to see you. I was like, I'm happy to see you. You have what I need. Okay.
That is crazy.
I'm so happy that, I mean, for me, it's just the peace of mind that you feel when you're vaccinated is worth it for me.
It's crazy because I'm sure people think that you had like some super secret vaccine that you've already taken. So that even humanizes the process that you.
Well, you know what? I actually was going to take the vaccine in the phase 3 clinical trial. Mm-hmm. But I didn't, just because there's a time commitment and I had a whole job to do. But my family and friends enrolled in the phase 3 out of proof of principle, because people kept saying like, oh, well, why don't y'all vaccinate your family first? And I'm like, okay. No problem. So I had several family and friends that were in the phase 3 clinical trial. My boss's daughter was in the phase 3 clinical trial. I would never risk my auntie's safety to prove a point, right? So I've believed in this vaccine since, actually, to be completely honest, since I started to see the animal data, even before it went into people. But particularly once I saw that the immune responses were as good as they are, I was like, oh yeah.
So you couldn't take it because you were saving the world, and there's a time commitment, and that's the only reason.
Right, you have to go to the site. You have to log your symptoms and stuff in this diary. I work probably about 14 to 16 hours every single day, and I still don't get all my work done. And so the time commitment for me was a lot. Yeah.
And then final question, because you just made a good point. You got to go save the world. So we're going to keep bugging you. How does this vaccine affect people who have maybe diabetes or autoimmune diseases or health challenges, or if they're in cancer treatments, the people who have, I guess, the comorbidities that you talked about?
For people who had comorbidities as they were examined in the phase 3. So there was heart disease, high blood pressure, diabetes, and I'm probably missing several of them because I can't picture the graph in my head. But nevertheless, for all of the demographics, whether it be racial and ethnic demographics or comorbidities, the vaccine was safe and effective in them. So across ages, across sexes, across any of the comorbidities, it was safe.
How important has your faith been on this journey? I saw on Twitter that you got your own GIFs. I pronounce it with a hard G, but apparently you pronounce it with a J. And the one I used was, I'm a Christian, and you like bopping your head. So how important has your faith been in this? Because I remember, so my background is like biomedical research. God called me to ministry, and I left University of Chicago because God was like, you need to preach. I'm like, but I want to study like how the brain works and how it processes. It was like a biomedical psychology program. Anyway, so one of my professors was just like, I studied biology so long that I don't believe in God anymore. And so sometimes people think that science and faith are separate. So how has faith been important to you?
So, right. So I am a Christian. I think that what you were seeing was someone took pieces of an interview that I did with my pastor
Mm-hmm.
So Reverend Freddie Haynes in Dallas at Friendship West. But I, for me, it's just around science can tell you how, but it can't tell you why. It's a J. Cole quote, and it just rings true, right? There's absolutely so many things that we can learn from a scientific perspective. Like, oh, how does this work? How does the vaccine actually work against the variants? Right? We can answer that question, but answering the why is not up to human, right? That answer comes from God, and there are just so many things that around my faith that have kept me grounded all of these years, and especially now. So no, they are absolutely not separate, right? The director of the NIH has a book called The Language of God. So he's a geneticist, which means he understands evolution better than anybody, probably, well, better than most people. And his book, I would really, to people who are into science and also into their faith, I would really suggest his book to people, because he really breaks it down and how these two things essentially work together for the good. But yeah, I can't nothing really shake my faith. I think that's part of the reason why I'm able to be here with you after the year that we had. In general, is that but God.
That's the quote. I'm making my infographic in my head of all the things that we need to share. And it's saying, but God. Well, thank you so much for taking time to be with us. Like, we not just appreciate you for this moment, but just for what you do, for what you represent. You give us hope outside of like saving the world. And so our prayer team has been praying for you consistently. I have this prayer. I'm never going to send it to you because we probably got something wrong, and I won't air this part, but God gave me all these biomedical terms one day at the beginning of the virus. And I started researching, and like I put a prayer together for how I guess COVID kind of enters the body. So I like was praying about mRNA. I didn't know what I was praying about, but like we put it together. I sent it to my friend who was like the chief of public health in Atlanta. She just resigned. I don't know if you know Angelica Jeter. And then like 3 or 4 of my other friends, one of my friends is an MD PhD at Duke. And they were like, Kia, how did you put this stuff together? And so, but at the end of the prayer, we prayed. We didn't even know you existed. This was like in March. We prayed for the person who, the people who were leading the team, for their families, that their families would be covered, that they'd have the resources they need for the vaccine, that God would protect them, because we knew there would be just craziness happening. And so it was so crazy. Somebody reminded me, they're like, go back to the end of the transcript. You were praying for Dr. Kizzmekia and her team. You just didn't know who she was. And so
Girl,
I probably should.
From your lips to God's ears. Listen, I am so happy for everybody who has been praying this entire time. I have had so many people just reach out to me and say, God laid you on my spirit. Like, can I pray with you? Like, listen, please, the hard way, the way your grandmother does it, on your knees. Yes. Like, please do. I receive.
Yeah. I probably should pray that, dude, so that people know, people remember that part, that we were praying, we just didn't know who you were. And that's how crazy God is, to bring it all together. Mm-hmm. And just, we hope that, people hear this and that they learn from you, that they learn that they can trust this vaccine, that, you've given it to your family, you're getting your second dose. And that Black people, particularly the Black church, kind of really get around this, because I think the Black church is going to be pretty integral in helping to build trust in the community. We've always been kind of that place to disseminate information. So my prayer is that other, pastors like your pastor, I saw today that you're going to be with Bishop Jakes, that more people kind of get around this conversation, because the truth of the matter is, people need this vaccine. The virus is killing us at alarming rates. And as you said, the vaccine has killed no one. No one. And so we need it. And so thank you. We're still praying for you,